Welcome to Multifamily Grit, where we bring in the experts to share the pros and cons and celebrations and struggles of one of the most important industries in the U.S., multifamily property management. Today, I am joined by Hunter Nelson, partner at Elmington and the brains and grit behind Elmington's affordable success. I always say there's never a smartest person in the room, because I think everyone brings something new and unknown to the conversation. But if there were a smartest person in the room, it's easily Hunter Nelson, and you'll very quickly see why. And before we get started, we are sponsored today by Fortress, the only core property management operating system built with an emphasis for today's affordable operators. Fortress revolutionizes affordable management and reduces applicant move-in time to save money, generate cash, and drive your teams to success. Don't forget, if you like what you hear today, please like and subscribe. Hunter, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we dig in, would you mind sharing with our listeners how you got your start in affordable housing?
Yeah, definitely. So let's see here. I graduated Alabama, like right at the start of the Great Recession of 07, 08, and I was lucky enough to land a job at Regions Bank with our partners, Ben and Kerri. And one of the things that that office did and that Kerri did specifically was invest part of the bank's capital into affordable housing. And we were a one-stop shop. We had an investment bank at the time called Morgan Keegan, and we would be your equity, we'd be your construction lender, we'd do your bond underwriting and issuance. And we really did one-stop shop. And I was really trying to carve a place for myself so I wouldn't get laid off. We were losing money, the bank was at the time, like all banks and most companies were losing money at a rapid pace. And I was just convinced that at any point in time that I would be out of a job. And Kerri both was a traditional real estate lender, but also an affordable housing investor for the bank. And you know Kerri, and for the people who don't know Kerri, Kerri is not a very corporate person. I'm also now not a very corporate person, but Kerri definitely wasn't back then. Like refused to wear a tie. You had to wear ties, and so I kind of was like, hey, teach me how to do this, thinking that if Kerri's ever not here, it would be a natural step in for me, or an opportunity maybe for me to step in. And so I did maybe 1 to 2 projects as Kerri's underwriter, and then Kerri left. And surprisingly, the bank did not give me that job. I was like 22, which I completely understand. But then honestly, I went to work for another bank right when Kerri did. I was gone for maybe I would left Regions in between Regions and Elmington was maybe 15 months. And I joined Elmington because they had just gotten their first affordable deal. And as a project that we did in downtown Memphis called Crescent Bluff Flats, it was 72 units of new construction. We had a customer of ours at Regions who had won the allocation and had some legal troubles in the rest of his portfolio that he couldn't find an investor. Came to us, asked us if we would buy the credits from him, which is laughable because, we were a startup. What were we going to do with $10 million of tax credits? We weren't making money, much less were we paying taxes. And but we told him we would take over the project for him. So we paid him a little bit of money, took over the project, and built 72 units in downtown Memphis. And I remember our first ever partner retreat. It was funny. Kerri had a cabin up near Monteagle, Tennessee. And we were there and we all kind of sat around, we threw the football and it's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I think I want to do affordable housing. I didn't have 2 nickels I could rub together at the time. And I realized in that development that a lot of sweat equity, or a lot of sweat and a lot of hustle, could turn into equity in affordable housing if you did it right. And so kind of around the time that you joined Elmington, which was maybe a year later, I started then we were acquiring a bunch of affordable housing, but really just started doing 1 to 2 projects a year. And then in 2016, the affordable housing business really, it doesn't follow the economy per se as much. It follows the health of the banking sector. So if you have really healthy banks, you have a very healthy affordable housing industry from a development standpoint. And banks really recovered from the recession. They were really starting to pay taxes again. And really in 2016 is when things really started going again. And so we really, we hired a guy named John Shepard, who was probably the best hire we ever made. And then from there, he kind of talent begots talent. Everyone kind of followed John just because John is the LeBron of our group. And I'm just trying to clear the path for him, clear the lane, let him do his thing. And then for us, it's really been from there, it's just kind of kept growing, and no one's more amazed than me, much less all of us, that we've been as successful as we've had and had a moderate level of success. So it's been pretty fun. So it was just kind of, honestly, I didn't even know real estate was a career coming out of college. Much less did I know that I would be doing this, or that even what affordable housing was. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It was a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, it's such a great story, but I have to confront you on this. You said a moderate level of success, which is absolutely not true. You're seeing incredible success right now.
Well, I just live in constant fear that the world is going to drastically humble us, and so I never try to let myself or anyone around us buy into our own hype. Like we've started a real estate business at the greatest time ever to start a real estate business. Now, luck is just where preparation and opportunity meet. You know that old saying, and we've been extremely blessed, extremely fortunate that when things have gone our way and bounced our way, we've been there to kind of pick up the ball and keep going. And really it's been super fun. And really, honestly, the best part about it is the teams that we've been able to build. And, we had an office that wasn't much bigger than this podcast studio. You were in a closet. I was in a supply closet with 2 double doors that couldn't shut. Yep. And so if one of us was on a conference call, we were all on a conference call. And it's just funny now when you look back on, I don't know how many employees we have. It's probably close to 1,000 now.
Yeah.
In fact, we can convince anyone to work with us, but much less like the talent that we've been able to get to come is just kind of unbelievable. And so when you look back on the career, that's what's made us successful. It's not necessarily that we had like this amazing idea or anything like that. It's been the people we've been able to attract and then retain and give them opportunity. And it's just been, it's just really funny. I mean, I remember we were an operation of like 6 or 7, 7 with John Grantham, right?
Yeah.
and
Yes.
and then we got a property management business, and all of a sudden we went 4x employees, and it was like, well, now we actually have to have benefits, and I don't know, it's just so funny that we actually have all these systems and services in place. I still try to run like we are living in a closet, and and try not to still remain as hungry as we can. But it's been super fun. Just how awesome it's been. And again, like you look at just the people you get to walk into the office with every day, and it's like, man, this is fun. This is fun. And that's what I love most about it is the people you're able to attract, and then you see their success, and then you're just trying to ride me. Now I'm just trying to ride their coattails to success, because I'm doing less of the actual individual deals now, but more of just trying to do a lot of the stuff that probably is not my bailiwick, which is all the back end stuff. And so I've been able to surround good people around me who force me to do those. So
yeah. I love what you said about still trying to run it like we're in the back office.
Oh, 100%.
Over this weekend, William and I were actually working together, trying to do some things, and I couldn't gain access to certain parts of our software. And I was like cussing on a Slack call with him, and I was like, what the fuck is going on that I can't even access certain things? I mean, we're a SOC compliant company, so like, there are a reason why their permissions locked down. But I'm like, I miss the good old days when it was just 5 of us, and I had access to everything. Like, I never had to ask for permission.
No.
So,
I
feel you.
When we had to have the conversation around benefits and mileage reimbursement, it's like mileage. Who cares about mileage reimbursement? But people care. People really care. Yeah, it's just laughable looking back on just how much when you grow a business, how much all that stuff that you don't think about, and how much it takes up so much of your time, and then it leaves you very little time for the stuff that actually is the stuff you enjoy doing and matters. But it's been a fun ride. It's been awesome. Affordable housing was never even on anybody's radar when we started, and now I feel like it's one of the it and data centers are like the 2 investments du jour right now. And I don't know, it's awesome. It's amazing where it's great public policy meets great business, one of those few crossroads, you know, and it's been fantastic. So we love it.
Tell me about your team today. So how big are they? And what are they working on? Yeah,
so we have just in the development side about 28 to 30 people. And that includes like support, accounting, and all that. But mainly these are the people who are in the developments every day. So we're very active in Tennessee, very active in North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, Texas. We have some new opportunities kind of out in the western part of the state or western part of the country, Alabama. And so we're right now, honestly, this time last year, about 12 months ago, when interest rates spiked and 10-year hit 5%, and I remember I was at the beach on a birthday trip for my wife, and I was on the phone the whole time. She's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Well, it just feels like interest rates are spiking, and I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do about it." You know what I mean? Do we pull back, or do we just like lean in and pretend this and just be willfully ignorant, pretend this doesn't exist? And so Kerri and I were on the phone a bunch. Ben and I were on the phone a bunch, and I was like, "Guys, I've been saying for 5 years that we'll do the most amount of business when interest rates spike, just the way we're capitalized and the way that we run the business." I was like, now, like, it very much, everyone wants to be contrarian. Everybody wants to be, Warren Buffett buying Goldman Sachs stock, or the whole old adage of when there's blood in the streets, buy, right? But when there is blood in the streets and when there is a lot of pain in the market, you're just like, you want to, ratchet down your business and make sure that you are in recession proof. And I tend to, like we said, like running on a shoestring. I was like, let's just pretend that doesn't exist. Let's keep going. And I feel like if this is an overcorrection, I'm not an economist, nor do I even pretend to be, but I was like, we should keep going, and we'll see how far we can get. And eventually things will come back to an equilibrium, and we'll be there, right? We'll be ready. Everybody else is pulling back. We'll get land for the first time in a long time. As long as the banking sector remains healthy, it'll be there. Construction costs will come down. And so I was like, hey, let's put our foot on the gas, and let's really double down, really put all the chips on the table and see what happens. And as long as the election doesn't screw us up, like, we're going to be great. And rates are now down. It was probably 379 this morning, 380, which is like 120 bip drop since that decision. And it wasn't just that one decision. I probably had like 50 conversations with our equity, with our lenders, with other partners, our account. I mean, really everyone. And then every day it was kind of like we would gut check, be like, how do we still feel? Do we feel good? You feel good? I feel good. And it was kind of like if somebody was like, I'm not sure. I was like, I'm not sure either. And like, it was very much like all wearing your emotions on your sleeve, and you're riding an emotional roller coaster every day. But it's going to end up being great. So we'll probably end up closing. We hit 11,000 units of new construction this year in terms of units started. And if everything that we have in the pipeline that has pretty much has our bonds or has our credits or has our allocation at this point, we should finish next year like right around 16,000 units. So it'll be awesome. Like, it'll be awesome. Again, there's still a lot that can go wrong and still a lot that could go right. But for us, it's just like, keep your head down, just keep moving. And most of that all closes by June 30th. So it'll be huge year, big year for the business, big year for just the entire platform. Because the best thing about our business is, and the affordable, is that we round all the bases because we're vertically integrated: the property management, construction, Fortress, marketing. I mean, really every organization of Elmington touches each deal, which makes them just so much fun because everybody gets to work on them. And so we'll do our first deal out west. We're closing a project in probably in the next 45 days in South Dakota.
That's incredible.
Yeah, which is just, if you told me there was like a state I would have been like, Hawaii, Alaska, South Dakota. Yeah, those would be the three that like, no way. I mean, you could have made a case for my own home state, Alabama. Like, no, we'll never do that. But we've closed now. It will be 3 projects this fall in Alabama. But yeah, South Dakota is like, definitely, no, we won't do that. You know what I mean? And so we're doing a project in Rapid City, which is where Mount Rushmore is, and where the big, you seem like you really like Harley Davidson culture. We're the big Sturgis. Yeah. Where the big Sturgis Harley Davidson rally is. And so that's, it's been pretty fun. It's a booming city, a lot of people who have moved there, and just a lack of housing. So it'll be pretty fun to do that one. And then we're looking also kind of in that whole, all those flyover states, and would love to eventually get to Arkansas and go see, your family there and Chris's family there. But haven't found anything in Arkansas that that really has jumped out on the page. But we're looking kind of still Texas, then going north along the like Missouri River Valley and the Mississippi Valley or Mississippi River Valley, and kind of looking at all those states that tend to be flyover, that tend to be overlooked. But affordable housing is a need, just like water and sewer is. Yeah, it's an infrastructure. I mean, it really is. It's a city's infrastructure. You don't think about it that way. It tends to get more politicized than roads and sewers and water lines and things like that. But it's just as valuable in a city, especially like in Nashville, the one we're sitting in. Every city that has had major population growth has dealt with it, and there will never be enough of it. We can never build enough to fully capture it all, but it's part of a city's vital infrastructure, and you don't think about it until you need it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you said that about South Dakota and not thinking that you would ever go there, but at the same time, like affordable housing is a need everywhere. So it's so easy to think that, but we work with so many different groups right now that are just trying to get into really any state, any metro area, because there's just such a need for affordable housing right now.
Yeah, it really, I mean, everybody tends to think about, like, obviously the big tier 1 cities, New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, in terms of when they think about affordable housing. But I mean, it happens in a city that like Memphis, right?
Yeah.
Memphis, a city that really hasn't had a ton of population growth, but most of its affordable housing stock are like 1960s, 1970s built product, which doesn't sound that old. That's 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And you think about if a property hasn't had massive amounts of rehab and CapEx put into it, it's pretty run down. And that tends to be the majority of what we call like a naturally occurring affordable housing. NOAA for like an acronym, but that tends to be most of a city's affordable housing. When you think about that, it's like, man, we've managed those. Those properties are tired and they're old and they don't get a lot of love. And somebody's going to come in, do a really light rehab, tries to raise rents a little bit and then sell, and then hope that somebody else continues on. But that's just never enough money to get that thing back to where it was. And so for us, when you go into a city like Memphis, where we've built, I think maybe 7 or 8 apartment complexes, like the brand new affordable does really well, because the premium from that crappy old apartment complex out by the airport versus a new one downtown that's nice, safe, and it's in great shape because it's brand new. It's only about $100 to $150, and people will make that trade all day. And so we look in those kind of cities, or we look in a city like Memphis, or honestly, I keep pushing our team like Cleveland. I would love to be in Cleveland, Ohio, which said massive population decline, but usually the people who are left in Cleveland are the people who need affordable housing. Like it's not it's a need. Like we need new housing. So a housing stock is part of the infrastructure of a city. So you look at those, Cincinnati, Columbus. Columbus is actually a great growing market, but you look at some of these, Rust Belt cities that have kind of been stagnant for a while. Like I would still love to be there because there's still a need for affordable housing in all the cities. I didn't mean to pick on Ohio so much there. Yeah, I just don't want this to get picked up like, oh, Hunter Nelson really shit on Ohio.
I went to law school in Cleveland. I love Ohio.
Yeah. I mean, I actually love Cleveland too. I would keep telling our town, like, let's be there. The Guardians are great. The Browns are okay, but like, let's be there. Obviously the Cavs are okay, but it's like, let's be there, right? Yeah. Let's be in those kind of cities. Pittsburgh, these kind of cities that are great. Pittsburgh's actually a fantastic city, but these cities that have had not a ton of population growth, but have still have a need, if that makes sense. So it goes from, an Austin, Texas, which obviously has just been gangbusters for population growth, all the way down to Cleveland's probably the city in America that's lost the most population, or Chicago next. But those, and I'm it could be another city, so like I don't know, but those seem like the two. But from that standpoint, it's like there's a need no matter where you are in the country for affordable housing. And
absolutely.
The part of the issue with it is, and then we can move on, is affordable means a lot to a lot of different people, right? I mean, you think about what used to be affordable in Nashville to even a family that was like middle income is now no longer affordable, right? And so everybody, when they say we want more affordable housing, it runs the full gamut of incomes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that William and I were working on this weekend actually is that we were pulling actually RD income limits across the state of Louisiana, actually Mississippi and Texas as well. And it's really incredible to see the range of what's called affordable income in any of those states or cities. It's really a huge band. So,
yeah, it's especially in the rural communities where there isn't really any income growth. There's no new job. There's no new jobs that come to, I'll pick on my dad's hometown, Thorsby, Alabama, right? There are no new jobs that come there. Most young people want to leave, or want to go and where there are greater opportunities. And so because of that, rents end up being depressed. And as you well know, like the cost to build a new apartment complex is kind of, I mean, the bricks and sticks and the actual components that go in, they're agnostic, whether it's a toilet in Nashville or it's a toilet in, Thorsby, Alabama. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter where it is. It's going to cost the same. And so when you think about that, but the rents are so low, just never going to make economic sense to build there. And so you have these RD programs, the rural development, which are fantastic, but they also, they're also like tend to be like some of the only rental housing that exist out in those farming communities in middle of nowhere Arkansas or the middle of nowhere Alabama or Mississippi, wherever it is. And generally the cost to build something new is so prohibitively expensive relative to the rent or any sort of return you can get that generally most of your housing tends to be stuff that's been either comes with heavy government subsidy or comes with is just a rehab of an existing. Mm-hmm. So RD is a whole nother, it and Section 515 are all, a whole litany of subsidy that we have not gotten into. Yeah. Not sure my Alabama public school education will allow me to get into that. It's just it's so complicated. I've looked at it before and have just been left with just like all right, that seemed like a lot. And I'm still not exactly sure how it works, but there are some great companies out there. One of Ryan Siebel's best friends, a guy named Will Eckstein from business school, is like a giant RD developer, and I've had some conversations with him, and they do a fantastic job. But yeah, it's one of those things that I still haven't been able to make sense of.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
It's its own world, that's for sure.
100%.
So I'm gonna have to pick up on it. You mentioned the election, and how that might impact affordable moving forward. So how are you feeling about that? What are your thoughts?
If you ask me like what is the thing I'm most worried about, it's that right now.
Yeah.
Really 2016, the election that nobody saw coming, right? Everybody thought Hillary would win, then Trump ends up winning, and then the Republicans, carry both the Senate and the House. And so this idea of corporate tax reform became like a real thought and a real idea. And really affordable housing is there's a long, we've tried a lot of different things in affordable housing as a country. Tried public housing, which everybody tends to know, which is, direct ownership and development of the housing from like a local housing authority. Then we tried Section 8, then there was some Section 236 and a lot of other things that we've tried. But in 86, the Reagan administration came up with the low-income housing tax credit program, which has been the longest probably housing program we've had and probably the most impactful in terms of units. I think it's like somewhere around 3 million units. I have a great white paper if you'd ever want to read it on like policy history of affordable housing. And so really as a developer, what I'm selling is like tax losses to banks and large public companies. And the government gives me like an IRS gift card, you know what I mean? And I sell that, and that's the equity that I use in this. And so with the idea that tax reform would be coming and corporations would pay less taxes and banks thus would pay less taxes, we couldn't really peg a value on what are these credits worth, and specifically we sell the tax credits, we also sell depreciation off the property as well. Mm-hmm. And the investor is getting all of that, both the depreciation and the credits. And so we now couldn't really value the depreciation stream. We couldn't tell you what it was. And so we had a bunch of projects in 2016 that we were getting ready to close at the beginning of 2017. And then all of our investors were just like, hey, we're out. We don't know how to value these. And so they all walked away. And being young and arrogant and brash, John and I were both like, oh, the pendulum swung too much. Again, this is two non-experts being like, hey, we can figure this out. Being sub 30 years old. Yeah, we know what we're doing. And we're the pendulum swung way over here and we need to just swing back a little bit and the market will kind of return. And we're like, let's just hold on to all of the deals that we're doing, extend land contracts and just keep going. And then we'll it'll come back. And that's kind of what happened. It was kind of amazing. Not that it came back, but that it worked. That really, it was going to work for John. That for me, it worked out. And so when you think about what's happened, what's coming now is there's a lot of talk around housing, right?
Of course.
Trump for all of his bluster about a bunch of different things. he probably had the largest expansion of low-income housing tax resource or of affordable housing resources of any president in recent history. I mean, Obama did a big one through part of the Stimulus Act in 2008 and fixed the 9%, which was a big deal at the time. And then, but really Trump came in and fixed the 4% at the end of 2020, and it's had massive implications for affordable housing and probably has produced and allowed made it economically feasible for a lot more units to be produced. So like, you think about that's a Republican president, right? I mean, he really poured into it. And so you have, obviously you have that, but what you don't want now is he's out there saying that he wants to lower corporate tax rates even further. And you're like, oh God, just please don't. And like, I tell everybody,
how does that impact you?
Well, again, it's like if we were at 35%, then now we're at 21, and so that was a
corporate
loss.
Tax rates.
Yeah, corporate tax rates. Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And then he said in a speech he wanted to go down to 15, and it's like, oh man, that would be detrimental to my business in terms of like,
because the less taxes,
they pay, the less demand there is for my equity. Yeah, essentially.
Yep.
And so that'd be super negative, right? Yep. And then also too, banks have a regulatory requirement to buy these credits. It's called Community Reinvestment Act, CRA. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's probably the biggest driver of equity in our market. And when Trump was in office, he elected to simplify it. It's not a very simple regulatory regime. And there's 3 separate regulators that you have there that regulate the banks. And it was not simple at all. And so he was trying to simplify it, which was not good for us. But and then Biden gets elected and he immediately puts that on hold. And there's been a little bit of reform, but not nearly as drastic. So that's like one side of it. You're like, God, please don't cut the tax rate. Part of my nightly prayers is a corporate tax increase. Yeah. You know, I pray for it every night. I would love if my banks paid more. And I tell everybody, like, join me, please. Anybody who listens to this, like, please add that to your prayers. It'd be amazing. And but then you have obviously like Biden and the Harris administration and currently, and then they've put a lot more money into Section 8, which is great, and are trying to put more into renovating Section 8 properties. And I imagine that if we get a Democratic, how about a left-leaning progressive administration, that they tend to be more affordable housing friendly, right? So that would be great. Yeah. But at the same time, she's saying that she wants a rent cap, like cap rents, and that would probably, there's been lots of studies shown that like rent, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't matter. But if you cap rents and you kind of use a policy to keep rents artificially low in the market, that it doesn't really, it actually produces less units. And so as we're seeing in Nashville, we're seeing in Austin, like, yes, we went through a lot of pain in terms of rents. We're on a hockey stick curve. And then now there's so many units that are being delivered. Rents are falling, and they're falling drastically. And so it's one of those things, like, you just let the market, you'll have periods of dislocation, but let the market really do what it needs to do. And so when you cap rents and it becomes rent control, that was the word I was looking for. You have this rent control, it could have massive implications as it relates to supply. Yeah, supply, not just of affordable housing, but like all rental housing. And so,
which impacts your affordable housing.
Yeah, it impacts everybody, right? And so, but for us, it's so right now it's like, oh my gosh, just everybody let's just stay where we're at, like, let's chill out. That would be amazing. And so for us, as we have all these projects that are getting ready to close, and we've put our eggs in the basket, put our eggs on the table, and we're really, or put all of our chips on the table. It's like, let's just keep things the way they are. Let us get through where we are, and then you can do whatever you want to do. But at the same time, like, it just neither one of those are like great policies. I'm not sure as a country we can afford a 15% tax return, right? And maybe somebody will call in and be like, that dude doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And you're right. You're right. But as it's not benevolent me saying that, it affects my business 100%. It affects my business, and my business is like, I sell corporate tax losses, and I need corporations to pay more. And as a country, we're in an affordable housing crisis. We are short millions of housing units, no matter what their cost or what they are. Yeah. We need more housing built, and that would severely hamper new housing targeted to affordable families, and rent control on a national scale would severely hamper housing supply across the country. So we'd only then just hamstring ourselves for a generation if we really had that. So there's pluses and minuses for both. Again, Trump passed the largest, honestly, it was huge. I mean, my projects just instantly got it was like 28% more in credits. And when you think about that didn't go in that didn't go in our pocket. It went to
Yeah.
pay for like the massive amount of cost inflation we had, and interest rates went up and all that. All of that money was kind of given just to make the deals get back to where they were baseline. And so, I mean, he has shown that he cares, right? And at the same time, you know, a more progressive administration would show that like they tend to be much more affordable housing friendly. And so either one who passes, it'd be great if we just didn't do anything drastic on any of those things for affordable housing specifically. Like you may think we need to do things drastically. I tend to be much more moderate and in the middle, which is why I feel comfortable having this conversation, because I can argue both sides of it. But same time, I'm just like, for affordable housing sake, let's just keep things the way they are. We can make big changes to what you want on, you know, military spending and other things like that. And but for me, it's like stay where we are, and the industry will keep going and keep producing massive amounts of units, which is what it's done over the last like 4 or 5 years, which has been great. States like Tennessee, which used to never use its full allocation of tax credits in its non-competitive program, are now like oversubscribed. So Tennessee in particular has seen that. You know, North Carolina's there. Georgia shut down its program for 2 years just because it had such a backlog of projects, and that never used to happen. You know, Florida, like even you think about Ron DeSantis, who was running for, you know, the Republican nomination. While he's running, Florida passed the like most progressive housing policy probably in the country with its Live Local Act, and it pretty much surrupted all zoning in the state of Florida. And it was like, if you're commercially zoned, or you have the ability to become residential within, there's a bunch of rules around it, but it was super progressive just because Florida's in a state of, we need housing. There's so many people who are moving there. We have to have housing. And so they did that. They did a massive amount of money into their housing trust fund, or that went to like their sale program. And I mean, they pumped a ton of money into it. And that's, again, DeSantis was like, you know, going for like he's going very not middle, not moderate, but like, you know, right leaning as it relates to a housing policy. And he is that. And his policy was like super progressive, more progressive than probably what Oregon passed, which allows like accessory drilling units like on most properties. And so, but it's amazing like what each side of the aisle feels it now, and it's great. I just want to get through the election. So get through November, and I'll feel a lot better about where things are. And it's, you know, so long as nothing changes, it'll be great.
I understand. And I thank you for that interpretation of where we are today and what you think may or may not happen in moving forward with either administration. I think that is really helpful.
I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we had the rent control, or not rent control. We had inclusionary zoning, a lot of inclusionary zoning conversations in Nashville that didn't get passed. And so it's one of those things that, you know, you see it from a local standpoint, all the arguments that happen when you're trying to manage a very local issue, which is housing, right? And if you had a big broad perspective, if you had a big broad sword that just said, this is what we're doing for housing across the country, it'd be crazy. Like Nashville couldn't be Nashville if there was rent control, because it wouldn't make sense to build all the housing, where would all these people live? Right? Or Austin, for that perspective. Where would all those people live? And it would just be, it'd just be really interesting. I'm a big, let the market need what it needs to do, which is so funny from a guy who relies upon government incentives for his business. So I understand the, how ridiculous that sounds, but I am very much that way. Like, doesn't make sense to build affordable housing in terms of economics. If it did, we'd have a lot more. We have a lot more of it without incentives, but it doesn't. So it has to have some sort of incentive. If we view it through the lens of infrastructure, then it makes sense, right? There are very few private roads, there are very few private tolls, there are very few private utility systems and all that. So it makes so much sense, actually. I think that your pragmatic viewpoint is, at least, has really helped me understand the market, and I agree with you completely. I do not think we need any massive swings. I really think that we need to continue status quo, and I agree with you completely that the market needs to drive the demand for housing. So but interestingly, you have found a really unique way to really continue to make your affordable housing successful with a new feature at a lot of your products, or a lot of your new assets. So I'd love to talk about solar. Oh yeah, I forgot. That's my passion project on solar. So obviously, there was a bill that got passed called the Inflation Reduction Act.
Obviously.
Obviously. It's so well named. I actually would love to be the person who comes up with like the acronyms and and the names of things like, we're going to call this bill the Tomahawk Bill, you know what I mean? Or something, just like, something like that, but for, the Inflation Reduction Act, I don't know. it was just so funny it's named that. But really what it included is a lot of times, like, just the way the federal government has evolved and changed over time, you would think that like all tax credits and all things are like, you would imagine like the low income housing tax credit, which is a housing policy, was administered by HUD, right? It's not. It's administered by the IRS. That's right. And so you would also think that the historic tax credit, because it's a tax credit, is then administered by the IRS. It's not. It's administered by the National Parks Service. So it's like, doesn't make any sense at all. And so we have all of these we have all these like different policies and different aims, and a lot of times they just don't talk to each other, right? Like the Section 8 program, how its rents are not set the same way as the low-income housing tax credit rents. They're set on market-wide FMRs that come out at a different time than the LIHTC do. So it's a lot of alphabet soup and a lot of competing ideas and thoughts and just trying to marry them all together. And for the longest time, if you wanted to do solar on an affordable deal, you had this very complicated structure where one company owned the solar and then leased it back to the affordable, and it just did. And if you wanted to own them in the same and make it easier, then they kind of like didn't work with each other very well, and so it was super complicated. And when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, it simplified it. It was like, okay, hey, we're now going to go back and marry these together where they make sense, and then there's some benefits for affordable housing on solar as well. So our project in South Dakota and is the second one that we've put solar on. Our first one is probably, I don't know, maybe 10 miles from here west in Poplar, and we put on every roof has solar. The detention ponds are covered in it. We've covered our common area electric. We tried to wire the residents' electric meters with the solar, and the way that the local utility here works, and TVA, which is the big, obviously, like Tennessee Valley Authority, that it's actually the one generating all the power here. They charged a monthly fee for a meter that could roll backwards and they could get the credit for it, and that took away all the incentive essentially. And so now we're just like selling power back on there, but effectively in like the base case, you can generate about 67 cents per every dollar you spend on solar, which is awesome. And then if it goes to affordable housing, you can apply and get an extra 20 cents. So, and there's all these incentives along the way. If you hit all of them, you can actually generate, and I don't think anybody should do this, but you could actually generate like $1.17 for every dollar that you spent in on solar energy. And it can be anything. It could be a geothermal plant. It could be anything that is kind of sustainable or renewable energy. It doesn't have to be solar based. You can do that, and especially and marry it very well with affordable housing. So we're trying to incorporate it everywhere, not only as like a good policy, but also as like an opportunity to reduce our cost, right? Because I mean, like now the government's paying for a good portion of that. The return is great for us on putting it and covering at least our common area electric. And then in some situations, like our project in South Dakota, where land is plentiful, as you can imagine, we have built, and the design calls for an entire like 15 acres of solar.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's taken up the entire. It's going to hopefully provide the energy for all the entire property. So the residents, part of their rent will just include the power. And then you're trying to marry up your usage and your production. So you produce obviously when the sun's out, but most of your usage is in the evening. And so I don't think we're doing a battery facility, but we looked at that for a long time with these big like Connex box size batteries, like 4 of them that would then store the power while it was being produced, and then you would drain it down while you were using it throughout the evening. Then we end up not going that way, but it's really interesting. New York has a really interesting community solar program, and a bunch of other states do too. But it's kind of it's the new thing in affordable housing, and we're very interested in it and are trying to include it on, at a minimum, covering our common area electric on everything we're doing, just because it's kind of this like awesome, we can argue if renewable energy is a good policy or not, right? But for me, it's kind of like it's a unique opportunity for me to add one more thing to my development that would that kind of sets it apart. especially me when I'm walking into a community, and I'm going for zoning or something like that. I'm talking to council members, and it's like, oh, and I think I'm gonna have solar panels here, and this is how we do this. It's like Elmington Elevates when we talk about some of the community support that we do and some of the things that we do with tenants and residents and kids on site.
Yeah.
It's just one more feather in our cap to hopefully convince a community to allow us to develop there. But yeah, we're really excited, and I can see you can see the end goal being that you produce a lot more energy this way. You know, I'm not sure as the population keeps growing in this country if like we'll ever offset, right, any of the existing power things. And again, don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. I read a lot about it, but not an expert. But from my standpoint, it's just a unique opportunity to marry the two together and really fix where two federal policies were at odds with each other, and now they have an opportunity to be together. And it'll be really, really interesting. I'm really excited. The first solar array here in Nashville gets hooked up to the grid, I think, in about 30 days. And so I'm really excited to see like how much energy we produce, how, does the thesis that we're operating under actually hold true in practice? And, but it's a pretty exciting opportunity right now, especially if you're in an area that, like the western part of the country where you have big sky, you don't have a lot of trees, you get a lot of full sun. Texas and kind of that whole like Sunbelt area, and in Tennessee, we don't get as much just because we have a lot of trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you think of like down in Florida, it's sunny all the time, right? It's a sunshine state, and the Gulf Coast of Alabama we're building, we're trying to incorporate it there just because you have a lot more days of sun, a lot more days of production. And it's just it's something cool that we're going to try and happy to report back if it actually made sense or not.
Yeah. So. Well, I've always thought, since you and I first started working together, that you are so creative in how you've been able to figure out a lot of these deals. I mean, it's not easy, but it's harder than just outside of the code. Like actually trying to start a LIHTC deal is hard anyway. In and of itself, it's hard, but it's even harder than what most people think. I mean, because making them pencil is not easy.
Yeah.
Like just because there are tax credits involved and just because there's a set equity source, essentially, as long as the banks need the credits, like as long as there's a set equity source, it's easy. It's not. It's still very hard to make these deals pencil, especially as you mentioned, as it's become more and more expensive to build, period. It doesn't matter what you're building or where you're building it. It's just insanely expensive. And I love how you've always found really creative ways to make the deals work. So
yeah, it's you think about our projects, that one that we just closed in Austin maybe 9 months ago. We had a full property tax abatement, and we had a sales tax abatement on our construction, and we had the federal tax credits, and we had tax exempt debt, and we had all that, and then the deal still barely penciled, and that's
insane.
Yeah, so you think about like, oh, you're getting, a lot of times we get all these critiques of you're getting all these incentives.
Yeah,
you must, and it's like, yeah, it takes all of that to make a deal work. So and you can obviously, there are periods of time where everything goes your way and the return is great, but there's a lot of times where it doesn't, and for last year when rates were high and they'd really been on an uptick, things weren't going your way. It still costs the way it is. Even today, rates have dropped, but like our costs really haven't dropped, a comparable percentage at this point.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, we're flat and seeing maybe a little bit of a decline. And so it takes all of those things just to make a deal make sense for us to take the massive amount of risk that it takes. And that's really, as an affordable developer, what you're trading is like you're putting a lot of upfront capital into these projects because states want to get paid for you to use the incentive. I mean, it's $1 million plus in just fees to the state to make these deals work that you pay before you close in most cases. And so, if you think about that, it's probably like a $2.5 million investment to get to closing on each one of the deals. And so for us, like it's always and you're in these things for, like anybody who's developing new construction, we're in these things for 18 months from start to finish because we have to have permits in hand before we can really close our equity and there's a lot that can happen in 18 months. And a lot of times some of it's good, a lot of times some of it's bad, cost and rates and all that. But for us, and just economic change. And so for us, we're trying to really MacGyver these things and keep these things together along the way. And so you have to, like, being affordable developers, really just being a fireman and a crisis manager. It's
Yeah.
where's the current fire? I'm going there. I'm putting all my attention to that, and then hoping another fire doesn't start behind me. And so when the guys that and the women who work with me, that's like 100% their job is just, okay, we kind of have the steps in the program laid out of how these things work, and then the job is to follow the steps, keep going. And I say they have the steps. I haven't developed them. They've developed the steps. I don't want to take any credit for that at all. They've developed the steps. And then it's how can we keep it on the tracks, and how can we keep everything going till we get to that point? And then you just have to remain constantly vigilant, and then you have to remain constantly, flexible to problem solving.
Yeah.
So I always laugh,
Creative.
like John
Yeah.
Shepard and I were doing a project in Chattanooga that involved an allocation of Section 8 vouchers, project-based vouchers. And the city wanted us to we were arguing over rents for the vouchers because, like I said, they're not set the way that low-income housing tax credits are. And there's different ways you can set the rents in the vouchers. Yep. And so they were telling us we had to follow this. And John and I were like, no, we think we can do something separately. And so I stayed up one night till 2 a.m. reading the HUD Federal Register till I found these 3 sentences that we had to have, right? You had to have. And we sent them the next morning. They're like, oh, okay, great. And it was like, oh my gosh, it's just, thank goodness we got over that, and it just is, that's it. John and I always laugh that a lot of our life is like a real life Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
I mean, like a real life episode of Parks and Rec. And we have some great community stories of that. But it's just so funny, some of the stuff that you run into. Joe and Mark are the same way. The more that you do this in affordable housing, the more you have to engage with the city and with the state and all the agencies, all the people who work there. And for the most part, 99% of the people who work there are great, right? And they want it to work hard. Maybe you always want them to work a little faster, but they work hard and they do a good job. But there's never a Leslie Knope when you're with that 1% who's just in the way. There's never a Leslie Knope who comes in and saves the day. You know what I mean? So you're just constantly like, oh my gosh, how can I make Kerri Davis, who works in the codes department in Tallahassee, Florida, how can I make her just see that what we're doing is this, and the code says we can do that. And every now and then you run into people who are like, well, I just don't want to do it. And you're like, oh, God, okay, well, all right, how can we get over this? You know what I mean? And so you have to remain flexible, and that's all you are, is just a massive problem solver. And, I think we've closed just over right around 60 developments at this point. And so when you think about just how much experience we've gotten in a short period of time, you just realized how to solve a lot of different problems. And a lot of times for us, some days in the office are spent just sitting around being like, well, what if we did X, or what if we did Y, and just throwing it against the wall, seeing what happens. But it's been, and I will say, we have the greatest attorney in the business. I'm not going to tell his name because I don't want anybody to call him, but we have the greatest attorney in the business who honestly, collectively, all of us, I don't know how he has any other clients, but collectively just spend a lot of time on the phone with him, spitballing ideas of okay, we're coming into this. What do you think about that? And then he has a great set of partners at his firm who are just affordable housing specific. And so if he's like, you know what, you need to talk to Kerri, you need to talk to Hunter, they're the experts on this. We get on the phone with them and they're fantastic. I mean, fantastic. And that tends to be probably our secret weapon is them. It is both our flexibility and our willingness to read ridiculous amounts of rules and Federal Register entries, but also just having
me back to law school.
Oh, it's the worst. It's the worst. Truly. I remember I stayed up, we got into a conversation about clean air in Memphis with somebody at HUD one time. And I was I was typing emails. I realized that I was corresponding with our consultant on it at 2 a.m. And I was like, let's just have a call. Let's have a call. It was 3 a.m. It was 2017. It was let's just have a call. And her and I were like, okay, I think if we do this, you know what I mean? And I was like, I read this. What about that? And so, but you end up just doing a lot of that. You end up doing a lot of reading to try to get over people's problems, because you think about just the massive amounts of rules and regulations that are issued on a city, state, county, and then federal. There's a lot of times they don't overlap. And if you're willing to go that extra mile and you're willing to have grit, plug to the podcast, then you can truly overcome a lot of it if you're doing it. And that tends to be the competitive advantage in affordable housing, is knowledge and your ability just to do it and work harder than everyone else. This business is not hard. As I said, product of the Alabama public school system. I mean, if I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out. Truly. I mean, truly, it's not that difficult. It just takes a lot of experience and dedication to go and just like read and then try different things and then ask a bunch of questions. And I've never been shy about like, okay, explain that to me, tell me this. And then I'm someone that Ben, our partner, always says like, you're someone who has to know how it works, to know how it works. Yep. And it drives him crazy. Yep. I have to know how it works. And so I'm always like, tell me how it works. So like, I'm constantly asking our equity partners, or I'm asking our lenders, like, tell me how you're making money. Like, I just want, like, I'm happy the money you're making, like, having the money, I'm not trying to steal it from you. I just want to know, how does your business work relative to mine? So I can understand how the puzzle all fits together and how the parts fit together. Yeah. And so I'm constantly asking those ideas. I mean, you and I have sat around on Fortress and with other businesses, the renters captive and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's like, okay, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I probably have 100 ideas a day, and maybe one a week or one a month is good. You know what I mean? But I'm always willing to like, hey, okay, what if we did this? What if we did that? And then generally, I have a few people in the office who are the people I go and pitch them to, and they're usually, most times they're like, that doesn't work. Like, don't waste my time. Don't waste your time. It doesn't work. And then every now and then, like, one works, and you're like, okay, all right. This worked. Now let's roll it out to everything else. So like, one thing we're doing now is bulk cable. Like, bulk cable is like this new thing that we've kind of discovered that we thought for a long time affected our affordable housing rents, but it doesn't, so long as you make it optional. And so now we're rolling that out across the properties, and it ends up, it's a good deal to the tenants. Good deal. It's a great deal for the residents in terms of bulk Wi-Fi and cable. And for us, it's a little bit more rent that we're receiving, but when you multiply that times 11,000 units, it's a lot of nominal money. And so we're really excited about that. Or solar, for that example. Like, hey, let's try. I'm always somebody's like, let's try a little bit, and if it works, great. Let's do it everywhere. And I tend to think that is the thing that sometimes gets us in trouble at Elmington, is like, we're like, oh, if a little is great, then a lot must be amazing. And that doesn't always work out. Senior living being one of them. But all that to say, it ends up being like really fun when you're in a group that is willing to try new things and new ideas abound. And that's definitely like the strength of the team that I get to work with, is like, we're constantly like, idea generation and then spitballing it with all of us. So there's no like territorial as it relates to, this is my idea kind of thing. And that's what makes the group so successful, is they very much are willing to try new things and willing to share ideas. So yeah.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I know you're so proud of your team.
Oh, they're the best. I mean, truly. Like, I really do love just getting to interact with them and seeing them outside of work and getting to hang out with them. They're incredibly fun and incredibly great. And I always think like the next person we hire, like our talent density just keeps growing. And we're to the point now that I'm the one that shouldn't be there. And so like we laugh, like a guy we just hired has like a JD from, I think, from NYU, and he just got his MBA from Wharton. And I'm like, man, golly, that Alabama finance degree with that philosophy minor is really, like, I've really carried it as far as I can. You know what I mean? I'm like that undrafted kid who kind of like, who had like one opportunity and made a statement, and it's like, oh, great. All right. You remember that guy? And so the team keeps growing well beyond my capabilities, which is great. I'm just trying to stay on the train for the ride that they're on, which I'm super pumped about. You're selling yourself short. You're an incredible leader, and people love to follow you. So I think it's just the, it's just the Alabama in me. And it's like, just remain nice. You know what I mean? That's what my mom always says. So, but yeah. I love it. Well, as we wrap this up, first of all, thank you for sharing as much as you did. I can't. I'm afraid I talked too much and didn't give you a chance. You were amazing. I still cannot believe that I got you to sit here and talk to me about the election that's coming up. I was like, when you said you were prepared to talk about that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Well, I was like, oh, this won't be too bad. And I told him, I was like, this is not my thing. And he was like, oh, you're going to be great. And I was like, I don't know. And then he followed up after I was like, I'm not sure, William. He followed up with a calendar invite, and I was like, all right, we're doing it. Yeah, great. This is great. I'm sold. So. Well, you made it. You made it. Thank you. Now the last question is just, do you have a story about property management you want to share with us? You mentioned this beforehand. So I had a good one. So like at the beginning, when we were just getting started, we used to do all of our unit walks ourselves. All of them ourselves, yeah. All of them, man. Yep. And they were hot, sweaty days, just, walking around with like a chambermaid set of keys, you know what I mean? And opening up doors. And we bought our second affordable deal we ever did. It was a project here in Nashville. We just sold it. It was called Hickory Lake. Yep. And it was 322 units. And I walked them all. And I had a big giant clipboard that had like, like probably like 100 components in the
unit.
in the unit. Thank you. In the unit. And we were trying to decide, we were going to try to do a targeted unit by unit rehab. We ended up scraping that.
Yeah.
But I spent 2
Thank
weeks.
God.
Yeah. I spent 2 weeks, out there and really office there for a while. And so, you would go and you'd knock on the door and you'd be like, maintenance, and most times people aren't home. Every now and then someone's at home and every now and then someone's asleep. And I walked into a unit. I still remember it was in the F building at the top floor. And I knocked and nobody answered. And a lot of times, and I don't know what it is, but residents will shut their bedroom doors. I've never shut my bedroom door when I'm not home, but people do that. And and it always makes me super nervous whenever I'd like walk in, I'd walk in, I'd kind of peer, make sure someone in there. I didn't want a gun pulled on me, waking somebody up, they think I'm breaking in. So I go in, I walk, and it's a one bedroom. I walk into the living room and I walk into the kitchen. I'm in the bathroom and I'm like, I'm walking around, I'm making noise and I'm checking things off. And then I get to the bedroom and I open the door, just assuming no one's there, and there's a young.
You've been there for 10 minutes.
Yeah, there's like a young couple in the act of lovemaking, and all of a sudden, the guy gets up and he's like, dude, get out of here, and he's running at me. This naked dude's running at me. I'm like, oh my god! So I ran out the unit. I shut the door behind it, and I'm sitting there. I'm giggling to myself. I'm also like, this is just what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? You know what I mean? This is what you do. You're getting paid to do this, you know what I mean? And so the guy's like yelling at me through things like, what do you want? I was like, oh, just maintenance. I was coming in to inspect the unit. He's like, well, can you come back later? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And it was just like, oh my gosh, there's 2 people in there. Dude's running at me. I was like, again, I went to lunch and really thought deeply about like life choices, you know what I mean? And after that, we hired like 2 high school or maybe 2 college kids to walk around with me to keep the clipboard after that. And so that way I'd at least have one more person with me in case anything happened. But it was just like, it was one of those like welcome to property management moments. And that one was probably the most memorable I've had. I mean, that was that. And like we walked into a unit, Hampton Cove in Louisville. You remember that one? It was just west of downtown. It was an affordable deal that we bought.
Yes,
it was red brick.
Yeah.
And we walked in and, in the living room was a stripper pole and it just like installed. And it was like, oh man, this is not how I grew up. and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, it just was a cultural shock. And I remember Ben and I kind of looked at each other being like, oh, all right. So let's just pretend that's not here and just move on. You know what I mean? And there's just a lot of those kind of things when you're walking. I mean, as you would, like we've told them, we give them 24 hours notice, right? But I mean, like, if you were to walk probably into my house right now, like probably the beds are unmade, I have 4 kids, the beds are unmade. Every morning is just crazy. Leslie and I were doing there's six of humans that, change clothes multiple times a day. So we were doing, it was probably a massive amount of laundry happening. There always is laundry happening and all these things were happening in our house. And if you walked into my house at a random time, even if you gave me notice, right? And you lived in a rental community, still you would walk into something and you're like, what is this? You know what I mean? And that's kind of what happens in affordable housing. And so like kudos to the maintenance men and the leasing agents and the managers who have to go out there and do it every day because walking into someone else's personal space,
their home
and having to do your job in that is so hard. And it truly is, it's a skill. If you have it, the good ones who have it are worth their weight in gold because it is just so well difficult. And then it's kind of like I was a bank teller in college and people get really upset about their money as they should. Right. Yeah. And
I was also.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. What's the worst thing you did? I want to know as a bank teller.
The worst thing I did.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I went through people's accounts.
Okay. Well, I cashed a $50 check for $500 and had to call them.
Oh my goodness.
Had to call
never
them.
did that.
Yeah. Had to call them and ask them to bring back the money.
Oh no.
Thankfully, we were in a small town in North Birmingham called Fultondale. It's a really small community, and the people had been customers and knew the head teller there for like 20 years. And they called and they're like, "Oh, we didn't even open up." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, yes, we have it." They brought it back, and like you're only supposed to be out of till. You're supposed to be like out on your till like $100 for the year.
Yes,
I blew that by like by a ton of money, like $400. $450 in one day, and so but people get upset about that, and just like they would, and so that job really taught me, like, when you're dealing with people's personal things, like you have to you have to remain calm, you have to view it from their standpoint, and when you're doing that, as a manager and as a leasing agent, I mean, you have to keep that in mind of like, it's an apartment to you, but to them, it's their home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so think about it. If the hot water didn't work at your house and you wanted to take a shower, you'd be livid, especially when you knew that it wasn't your responsibility to fix it. It was, Hunter, the maintenance man's responsibility to get there and fix it or whatever it is. And so the people who do that every day and truly like do it well, like kudos to them, because that's a tough job, and it's the ones who do it so well. And we have, my team in Memphis who've been with us for like 12 years now, Erica, Alice, and all of them, Dee Dee, who was there, they all do it so well. And they truly, they love the residents love them, and they are part of those people's lives and their family in a great way. Yeah. And then every now and then when you're in property management, you hear stories about what a manager said to somebody, and you're like, what were you thinking? You know what I mean? Like, what I really I want to know what was going through your mind that you thought that was appropriate. And you have those situations, obviously, but you tend to have the more of the great ones. You know what I mean? And that is what makes a property management so successful, is those people. We, as a property management company, you own no assets, right? All you are is a people business, and you're only as good. You're an HR business, and you're only as good as those people are. And so when you find a team that works, and people tend to ebb and flow, right? Like we all do in our jobs. Like, I've been gaining and losing the same 25 pounds since I was probably 23, and so we all go through that. And so it's just like that in a job. But the people who do it consistently year over year over year are the ones to be celebrated, because truly it's a tough job. And the industry keeps changing. We keep adding more technology, more things for them to manage, more things for them to do, more ways for them to communicate. In a lot of ways, it ends up being things that save them time and effort and make it easier, but it's also something else for them to learn. And so, truly, it's my small taste of it, you know what I mean, is in that situation. I was like, this is a tough job. So kudos to the ones who do it and do it very, very well. You guys are, as an owner and a partner in a property management company, like y'all are amazing. So, so the good ones keep doing it. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. A huge kudos to you too, Hunter, for continuing to add so much affordable housing in a world that really needs it.
Well, thank you.
And thank you so much for being here today. It was
Absolutely.
awesome to spend this time with you.
You too. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.